In this video, I'm going to show you how to take an older model pickup truck, or car for that matter, and make it run on used cooking oil. It works out better if you have a vehicle that actually runs, an older model vehicle that has mechanical injectors. You don't want to have a computer in it. I'm not sure how they work with the computer cars. I've never really researched that. The type of vehicles that I'm used to doing are these older ones with the mechanical injectors and the mechanical fuel pump. The mechanical injector pump. This is going to basically be a hands-on DVD. It's not going to be put, this ain't no professional job or by any means. If I step on anybody's toes by saying like a company name or promoting Snap-on tools or whatever, it's not intentional. It's just I'm just doing a video. There's going to be a few times where you see it jump from scene to scene. That's basically I'm trying to show you the best. A complete thorough from start to finish, from building, actually taking a tank, putting the plumbing in it and the heater in it, putting a tank in the truck, running the lines up to the front of the vehicle, and from the front of the vehicle hooking it into your fuel system, and then the switch inside. The only really tricky part about this is the switch, which when I send the DVD out with you, I will send a copy of a wiring diagram that I'm going to draw up. It's not, like I said, it's not going to be nothing professional, and you might actually hear people talking in the background or whatever. It's because we're in a shop, Walco Tools. It's a tool store here in Illinois. So let's get started. This particular box, I just put it together because I got a new tank that holds 26 gallons. The tank I had in here before only held 13, so I'm going to go with a little bigger tank so I can go a little farther. The worst gas mileage I've got out of this truck was 45.35 miles to the gallon. That was back in January when it was cold outside. Now that's for every gallon of diesel that I have to buy. That's as far as the truck would go, because you have to start the truck on diesel and turn it off on diesel. But the rest of the time, once the motor's warm, it'll run on vegetable oil. So for every gallon I had to buy, the worst I got out of this truck was 45 miles to the gallon. Now here's the good part. Last summer, when I was driving the truck and it was really hot out and the truck warmed up really fast, the best I got out of it was 207 miles to the gallon. That's for every gallon of diesel that I had to buy, the truck went 207 miles before it used another gallon of diesel. This particular truck is an 84 Ford Ranger diesel. Parts are kind of hard to find for it, but I got a good deal on this little truck, and I got about $300 roughly in this vegetable oil set up. I'd say between $200 and $300. This box I made is just a wooden box. I cut a slot out here in it so you could actually see the tank. When you put the tank in it, you'll notice that later. So you can tell how much fuel you have in it. I have insulation, which we're going to put in here. I'll show you later. This little box on the side, I'm going to try this out, see how it works, but it's just a waterbed heater that goes underneath the waterbed, and I'll put it underneath the tank so that way in the wintertime, next winter, I can just plug the tank in and it'll keep it warm at nighttime while I'm sleeping. When I come out in the morning to go to work, the tank's already warm. So let's go ahead and show you how to what size tank to get. Okay, this particular tank's a 26 gallon tank. They come in all different shapes, sizes. You can actually use I have a pontoon boat tank that I used last year that worked good, but it only held 13 gallons, so you ran through 13 gallons pretty quick. This one holds 26 gallons, so it's a little bigger, and I'll be able to go a little farther on it. Once again, those tanks come in all different shapes and sizes, so it'll fit different applications. Like if you got a Volkswagen Jetta or Golf or Beetle or van or whatever, you can get any size tank you want. The whole trick to it is, though, you got to be able to heat it up and keep it warm. You'll see when we put this tank into the box, we'll put insulation around it to help hold that heat in. I can show you this tank right here we got from Northern Tool and Automotive, or Northern Tool and Equipment. This is something they send you in the mail, and I ordered the tank out of it. It was fairly cheap. It was around $50 shipped to the house. I drilled a couple holes in it here to run the transmission cooler lines through, which I'll show you in a minute. That's actually how we heat this tank, is with the transmission cooler. This little nipple right here is the fill line. You don't need this. This is just something I chose to do because after doing it so many times, I don't like getting my hands messy with that grease. And on this particular tank, I'm going to go ahead and put a fill line on it. All it is I drilled a hole, took this fitting right here, dropped it in there, and then put a fitting on the other side, and then tightened it up. Nice and tight on there, and that's how I got a fill tube. Nothing fancy about this at all. This one right here is the pickup tube. It's basically the same thing, but I took a piece of pipe that extends about an inch down from the bottom, threaded one side of it and put it on there, and did the exact same thing as this side. Put it all together and it reaches down in there, and that's your pickup tube. And as far as tank, believe it or not, that's almost it. This right here is the transmission cooler. I got this from the local hardware store. Or not hardware store, automotive store. Once again, this ain't a professional video. You'll get used to that by the time the tape's over. This right here was around 30 bucks. So right now we got about $70, well, about $80 wrapped up in it, besides the little pipe fittings, which you can get from your hardware store. So you'll take this transmission cooler, connect your lines to it, like this. You want to make sure that you got them on there snug, because you don't want to leak. If you have a leak in there, you'll be getting transmission fluid in your vegetable oil, and that's not a good thing. So what I'm going to do now is take a second. This is 5 inches wide, which is the same width as this opening on this tank. And this right here, you'll see it'll drop down in there. You don't want to tear it up too much, but you want to drop this down into that tank, and we'll push the lines up through these 2 holes that I've drilled. That are the same outside diameter as this red hose that's going to be holding the antifreeze. All right, let me go ahead and put this in the tank. Okay. Right now I'm just feeding this line through there like that. Like I said, this has a 5-inch opening on it, so it makes it real easy to reach down through there. These are the coolant lines coming through. Now we'll push the transmission cooler down in there. And you want it to lay flat on the bottom. You want to have it all the way down at the bottom too, so it will disperse the heat and heat up this vegetable oil. Because the whole trick to making this work is heat. I've read a few articles about this, and I've done it for a while now, so I basically got a pretty good idea how this works. You want your vegetable oil to be at least 140 degrees before you use it. I have mine set at 180, which I'll show you later when we get to that part. But that's it. Now you have a transmission cooler down and laid inside the tank, and you got 2 lines running into it to run the antifreeze through here, which will run through that transmission cooler and help warm this tank up. The tank doesn't have to be as hot as the fuel heater, which I'll show you here in a minute. But now let's put this tank inside this box. This is what I'm using for insulation. I got a friend of mine who's a pipe fitter, and he actually wraps the pipes. It's like a black foam type insulation. It does really well. This is what I've used last year. So I'm actually lining the box with this, so that way it'll keep the heat inside that tank. We'll put this in here. I'm leaving my opening so I can see the tank, how much fuel I got in it. There's other ways to do. I'm sure somebody out there's got another way to put a fuel gauge in it, but keep it simple. This might seem complicated, but once it's all done and all your friends are not laughing no more, you'll be laughing all the way to the bank because you're saving money. Now, I built this box the other day, me and my son, so I basically test fit everything. And there's what it looks like now. Okay, now we will run these. We're going to actually mount the tank and the box up into the bed of this truck, and from there we will continue to hook up the lines, and we're steadily on our way to running for free. Okay, this right here, before we mount that box in the truck, I'm going to go ahead and mount my fuel water separator. This is also a heater. This particular model is a Web 525. It works, this thing increased my gas mileage tenfold. Last summer I was running without it, and then I saw this on one of the diesels that I drive for a living, and I thought to myself, this will work out perfectly. It actually heats the oil up super hot, and it has a water separator on it, so you can get rid of the water that's in your vegetable oil. And it has a cleanable filter in here. This one has a 70 micron filter, Now the key to making this whole thing work is you got to filter that oil down to at least 20 microns. If you don't, you'll end up having food particles stuck in your injectors, and then pretty soon it's not running no more. But this one, this is all this is. That's a cleanable filter. You never have to buy a new one. You just wash it out. Clean it out, wash it, dry it, slide it back down in there. Put the little rubber fitting back on it. You can buy these in. And I've actually found this one on eBay. It works extremely well. I would recommend this to anybody. There's different companies out there that make fuel water separators, heaters. You definitely want to heat it up as hot as the hotter that oil, the better. Because at 140 degrees, that vegetable oil is about the same viscosity as diesel fuel, meaning that it'll spray out of your injectors in the same pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this on that box. I have the bracket already on here, on the side of this box. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this on here, and you'll see the finished product here in just a second. This is that the Webb fuel filter that we got mounted on the side of the tank now. Like I said, you can get these things from Raycor. Check eBay. Check your local parts stores. You can go to the junkyard and get them cheaper. That's the best way to do it. Get them cheaper. This is the fuel pump, which I'll show you here in a few minutes when we get to that part. But right now, we'll concentrate on plumbing the tank up to the water fuel separator / heater. This hose that we're using, that you're seeing me put on here, is a 3/8 inside diameter hose, and it's braided. You want to keep it all to a minimum because that vegetable oil gets really hot and it'll eventually end up eating that rubber hose away. So you want to keep an eye on that. I just every time I change the filter in here, I check it all out to make sure nothing's leaking nowhere. It works perfect for this because then you can see if you got an air bubble in there, or if it's clogged up, or if you even got fuel in it, or vegetable oil, I mean. So right now we're just putting these clamps on here. We're going to make sure you get a good tight fit. And once we get this all snugged down, we'll move over to the hot water lines that'll be running into it. What I'm doing now is tightening up the top of this filter. Checking my fittings. These two red lines that come out of the tank. On this particular fuel heater, you have an in and an out where your hot water is going to run through here and come out. You'll see what I mean about the hot water here in a minute, because the hot water is actually going to come from the motor back here. It's going to go through the tank first. Once it goes through the tank and goes through that transmission cooler through the tank, it's going to come back out, and from there it's going to go out this red hose right here and into the fuel water separator here, like that. We'll get that snugged up here in a second. And then from the fuel water separator, it'll go through it, come out the bottom right here, and go back up into your heater core. We'll show you all that in just a minute. Remember, this right here is your fill tube where we're actually going to fill it, because I don't like taking the cap off no more. I got tired of I always have a camper show on this truck because I haul so much stuff. So I got tired of climbing up in here filling it up, where I came up with this little idea, which we'll show you in the Part 2 DVD, where you're actually going to learn how to go get your oil, filter it, and put it in the tank. But for right now, that line goes to there, but we'll show you that on the next video. This right here is just a fuel pump you can get from any local automotive store. It has a positive and a negative, which I have grounded to the bolt that's holding it. It's a 7-pound fuel pump, and it's plenty enough power to pull the vegetable oil from the tank through the filter and push it up to the front. We're going to go ahead and use it. We're trying to use as little rubber hose as you can, so we're going to go ahead and plumb this up the same way. Once again, it's that 3/8 inside diameter braided hose, because it's going to be carrying that vegetable oil, and I like to be able to see what it's doing inside there. So I'm going to go ahead and plumb this up, and then from there we'll just move right on down the line. Now this is all going to take a lot of trial and error, because each vehicle is going to be different. this particular vehicle, I've drove it for a while, and I've just been constantly improving this vegetable oil setup. You know, if you've got a better idea when you do yours, have at it. You know, it ain't like this stuff's gonna, it ain't cost you nothing if you spill it, so just a little bit of time. So just make sure you get your fittings tight. Actually, we're going to leave that loose for a minute until we get this other side plumbed up, because there's going to be a certain way you got to adjust this. It's going to carry the vegetable oil from this through the line, which we're going to show you next. We just mounted the fuel filter on the side of the box there. Next, we're going to go ahead and hook up the fuel line. This particular system I use is called a hose within a hose. This is just 3/8 flexible copper tubing you can get from any hardware store. It comes in a roll, what, 15 foot long, 20 foot long. You want to get a roll of it because you're going to need it to go from the back of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle. And you're going to need heater hose. This is 5/8 heater hose. Most vehicles have a 5/8 heater hose on it. You'll see why once we get up to the front. Once again, if I forget anything, feel free to email me. We'll talk about it. This hose goes through the this is how we're going to heat this vegetable oil. The hot water from the motor is going to come up the, this is, short, of course, it ain't the actual one we're going to put on there. I'm just showing you for illustration. The hot water from the motor is going to flow through this heater hose around this copper tubing, keeping it warm all the way up front, because you want to keep that vegetable oil hot. Then once it gets to this end, we're going to make these fittings. These are just, you can use brass, steel, plastic, whatever, but I've been using this these brass ones. You're going to put fittings on it like that, what you'll get from your hardware store. I believe these are half-inch fittings with 5/8 barbed end on them. And what we're doing here, of course you put your thread seal tape on it. Make sure you thread it up good. I'll show you on the truck because I've already got them plumbed up for the vehicle right there. See how the copper tube goes all the way through it? And it just, what it'll do is it'll go over your heater hose. This way you can seal it off by putting, you'll put another one on this side, or you can do like I did on this one. You'll put a compression fitting on it, which you can get from your hardware store. That way the transmission, or the hot water from your motor coming up through here does not have a way to escape, because you're going to have a compression fitting on there. Plus it'll terminate right there, and then it'll have this T on it, so you can go off into the transmission cooler that's in the fuel tank. So this is all it is. You've got your copper tubing, which the best way to do it is to lay it out. Take a piece of string, measure where your tank's going to be up into your engine compartment. You want to add at least 2 foot to it. Take that piece of string, lay it out, cut your 5/8 heater hose that you're going to get from your automotive supply store. Lay it out flat. You're going to take this 3/8 copper tubing, unroll that big old roll, and like I said, slide it up through there. Once you get it up through there, you want to put as little, the least amount of kinks you can get in it. So when you go to bend it up underneath your vehicle, on this particular vehicle, it runs underneath the truck, because I don't want to run it through the cab. But if you had a car now, it'd run inside the cab, or you can run it underneath the truck. It really doesn't matter, or the car. But it's going to fit through there like that, and you're gonna use your compression fittings and your ends on it to seal it off, and the copper tubing will come out of it on this side. I'll show you. We'll get it straight so we can get it through there. This is the tricky part. You don't want to kink it. See, this rubber hose will seal on that fitting right, or over your barbed end right there. You'll put your clamps on there, of course. See how the copper tube comes out? You'll put your compression fitting over it, tighten it down, and then you got a watertight seal. And this you'll see in a minute here, we'll have this plumbed in there. Well, this will actually run into the transmission cooler. But that way your vegetable oil will run through this copper tubing all the way through the inside of this, keeping it warm all the way to the front of the truck. Alright, so I'm going to plumb this up on the vehicle, then I will show you. Actually, I'll tell you what. We're going to go ahead and lay my line out and put it underneath the vehicle. This particular piece I've already pre-measured and cut. I'm going from the back of the truck up underneath to the firewall roughly all the way up to the hood. That way I have extra. You always want to have extra because you can't add to this copper tubing without making a mess. So as you can see, the copper tubing runs right through the middle of this heater hose all the way through it. This is called a hose within a hose. You'll read in a book that's out there called From the Fryer to the Fuel Tank, which is a great book. I read the section on this using waste vegetable oil. It says to use like a plastic polypropylene hose line run through the center, but I found that that doesn't work that good, because if you run out of vegetable oil, the heat from the antifreeze gets so hot that it actually melted in my plastic hose, and that wasn't good. So now that I got this copper tubing all the way through there, see that? I'm going to go ahead and put those fittings on there I was telling you about. After I put all these through there, tighten them up, and then I'll feed them up through the firewall, and I'll show you how we make the connections. Okay, I'm going to start at the back of the truck where we put them. You see them where we had the fuel filter at. I'm going to start at the back. This is that same fitting I made up. This is a, what is that, 3/4 inch? I can't read it. 1/2 inch. This is a 1/2 inch T. I have a compression fitting on one side and a barb fitting on the other, and another barb fitting. This is a 3/8 barb fitting. That's actually, this is the one that's going to run into the fuel tank there. And this one right here, we're going to slide it over it like that. Hook your hot water line right here up to it. Drop that hose clamp. Push that all the way up. Make sure we're getting a good seal. And now I'm going to tighten it up. You see the fuel filter here. This hole I drilled last year, so I'm going to reuse it again. And I lined it with rubber, just a rubber hose like this. I split, wrapped around it just to keep the sharp edges back. This is where that line I made is going to poke up through there. This line right here. I'm going to push it up through there. That way I can run the line underneath the truck along the frame rail. So let me get underneath here and line this up. That's why the truck's up on its side like this. Remember, safety first. So we got jack stands underneath it. Now we got the line through the bed. I'm going to put the compression fitting on here, so that way we can continue hooking up another rubber hose from the pump into the line that's going to feed the vegetable oil through this copper line up to the front. Okay, now that we got the compression fittings on here, you want to make sure you get those tight so you don't have a leak. So everybody will laugh at you. They're all going to laugh at you. So you make sure you get those snug. See how it's taking shape though now? Now you're going to hook a line. We're going to hook this up. Hook a line from the fuel pump right here to that. That's what's going to push the vegetable oil through this hose within a hose up to the front of the vehicle. Okay, this is the other line that we haven't hooked up yet from the transmission cooler that's in the tank. That'll go to this little 3/8 T fitting right here on this side of it, like that. So now the hot water will come up from the motor through this red line into the transmission cooler, heat up that oil that's in the tank, come back out this line right here into the fuel filter, heat it up even more, because this is the stuff you're going to be using. And from there it comes out this side, which we'll hook up here in a minute. This is that fuel pump I was telling you about. I believe it's rated like 5 to 7 pounds. Just a little pump, cheap one, like $30 at AutoZone. It's got a positive and a negative. We got grounded to the clamp that's holding it. And that 3/8 line, as you can see, it's going to pump the vegetable oil up the pickup tube, through the filter, out the filter, through the pump, through the compression fittings that we put on here, and through that 3/8 copper tube that runs all the way through that black rubber line all the way up front. So now let me snug up this hose right here, and then we will move to the front of the vehicle, and I'll show you where to make the connections for your hot water lines. On this motor, and basically all motors, you're going to have 2 water lines that run off of it that run into your heater core that's actually in your dash of your car. That's how you get the heat. So what you want to do is start the truck up, and you want to feel them. Which one gets hot? Whichever one gets hot first, that's going to be your in line. That's the one you want to That's one you want to splice into. In this particular case, I put a red hose on here just to show you. It would have been connected to the heater core right there, but I've already got it disconnected. That's where you want the hot water from the motor to run through that line. It's going to run through that hose within a hose that we made to the back and make its rounds back there, and then from there it's going to come all the way back up a hose by itself, which we'll show you in a minute, and go into your heater core, and then from the heater core it's going to come back out and go in the motor and go about its merry way. So right now we got the truck lifted up on its side a little bit. It makes it a lot easier to take that copper tubing and fish it up here through we're going to come up through the motor compartment right here to make our connection. Okay, this is a T-fitting that we made. It's 1/2 inch with the 5/8 barbed ends on it. We used Teflon tape. It'll go over that copper tube again, like that. That way the hot water can still flow through there. And from there, it will go into your heater line, and then we will seal it up and fish it up through there, like that. So let me tighten this one down, and then we'll fish it up through the fire underneath the cab. It's going to go underneath the truck, up through the firewall, and then up into the motor compartment. Before I feed this up into the motor compartment, I'm going to hook. This is another one of them fittings. We're going to take a piece of hose. Like I said, this is going to take a lot of trial and error, because your car is each car is going to be different lengths and whatever. This one is already basically cut to length because I've done it so many times. This is a 3/8 compression fitting again, with a coupler, and then you have your barbed end on the other side. I put a piece of hose on there, like this. Your hose clamp, another hose clamp, and then this 3/8 barb side, which is going to take a little bit to get past the compression fitting here, like that. We'll snug these down, but that's basically it. Again, that way once we put our compression fitting on there, it'll stop your antifreeze from coming out, but yet your vegetable oil that's running through this line all the way through it is staying nice and warm. And this is where we're going to go from here back into your heater core. You see, we're getting ready to push this up into the engine compartment. I barely got it bent, because this copper tubing inside of here will bend. It'll bend, but you don't want to put a kink in it. So it's coming out of the bed of the truck underneath it. And we got a little slight bend on it here. And we're just going to feed it up through the in the engine compartment, just like that. It'd be nice if you had one of those lifts. That way you can stand up and do this, but as you can see, we're doing it on the floor. Now we've got it started up in there. I'll go up to the front and pull it up inside there. Remember when I talked to you a minute ago about this truck and the 2 hot water lines that run into the motor, you want to start it up, feel them, see which one gets hot first. In this case, it was this one that runs into the heater core out here. So we disconnected it, and that T-fitting that we made that's on that line right down there now, if you get a shot of that, right here, that we just snaked up through the firewall. See that opening? That's where you're going to hook this line to now. That way the hot water from the motor travels through that line around this copper tubing, which is carrying your vegetable oil, keeping it hot. It's going to travel through there, underneath the truck, up again, and do its little course through the back, through the fuel tank, through the fuel water separator heater, and then it's going to come back through a line all by itself, another heater line hose, which I just ran, pops up right here. That will go into your heater core. That way you got a complete loop. So let me make this connection down there to that thing. Make sure you get your fittings tight. You ask why we're doing this? Because it's actually better for the environment. It puts out 2/3 less hydrocarbons than diesel. Doesn't put out any soot, and it's you're just reusing something that the restaurant's got to either pay to have hauled away, or they're going to throw it away anyway. So let me make this connection, and then we will keep on moving down the line. Now that we've made this connection with the hot water that comes off the motor first and goes through this hose within a hose, I made that connection right there. Make sure all your fittings are tight. From there, we're going to cap this off with a compression fitting. You want to hold all this stuff back with zip ties or any way you can. You want to keep it off your intake your exhaust manifold right there. So let me find some compression fittings for this. I got it sitting around here somewhere, and we will continue on. Okay, what we're doing now is taking this copper line. We're going to put a compression fitting on here, like that. Put the cap over it. See how I got extra here? There's a reason for that. We're going to cut it all off. Alright, that's on there. Let me snug that down. Okay, this is a T-fitting we're putting on here. The reason we're putting, and it has a bleeder valve on it. Same thing you see on the bottom of an air compressor. The reason we have this on here is once we put the vegetable oil in the tank in the back, we'll have to open this valve up to suck so it pushes the air out, so it goes through a valve right here. Okay, what we're doing here is I took another piece of 5/8 heater hose, ran it underneath the vehicle, or actually it's just laying underneath it right now. And this last fitting on the fuel water separator, we're going to hook onto that. That's going to return the hot water back up to your heater core. So we'll put that on there. Let me tighten that up. Once we get this tight, we'll go back to the front, snake the hose up there and hook it up to the heater core. Okay, this is a fuel filter that we're going to put on this vegetable line. It's a 10 micron filter. It's part number FF419, made by Douche. Get this from AutoZone. This will go on into here, and between this is called a Pollock valve. This is the same valve that's on underneath the pickup truck where you're able to switch from the front tank to the rear tank. This right here you'll get from you can get from J.C. Whitney. You can get it at the junkyard if you're lucky enough to find one. It's got 6 ports on it. The only sides you're going to need, it's got a small side and the large side. You want to use the large side. Also, let me point this out while I'm thinking about it. So you got 2 ends on this side and an outlet on this side. You want to blow some air through there, and you'll see which one's open, because right now, as you see, I got it unplugged. There's no power going to it. If you blow air through there, it comes out one of these 2 lines right here. That's basically your default. That's where you want your diesel fuel hooked up at, because you don't want to be driving down the road and you run out of vegetable oil and you can't, or your power goes out or you get a short and you can't run on diesel fuel. You want to make sure you have it hooked up this way I'm showing you. This way nobody's sitting there laughing at you because you're on the side of the road. So you'll blow air through there and you'll hear it come out this side. And I've done this enough, so I know the top one right here, because this thing's mounted upside down like this, where the ports are on the bottom. But this one and this top one is connected no matter what, because there's no power going to it. Once we get power going to it and we get it plugged in, when we flick the switch inside, which I'll show you in a minute, it pushes that plunger down, then it'll switch to this bottom line, which is your vegetable oil. But it all comes out, this right here goes down to your injector pump. We'll show you that in a minute. See how it's got the smaller lines on this side and the bigger line on this side? The small sides we don't even use. You can plug them off. We're going to be using the larger sides. There's 1 outlet and 2 inlets on this side. Remember, the top inlet is your diesel fuel, the bottom one is your vegetable oil, and this one right here is the one that goes down to your injector pump. Here's that hose real quick that's coming up out of the back of the truck from the fuel water separator, and this is where it goes into the heater core. I'm going to show you what this is. See this little device? This is the thermostat. I have this, one side's grounded, the other side goes inside to a light, and I've got it set just from messing with it. It's an adjustable one. I have it set at 180 degrees, so when it reaches 180 it tells that light in there to turn on, and the light tells me that it's safe to switch over to vegetable oil, because you want to run this truck, you know, over 140 before you switch it over to vegetable oil. This way it's kind of a, you know, it's an option if you want to have it, but this way when I'm driving down the road I can switch to vegetable oil as soon as possible without driving around on diesel and it's costing me money. So what we'll do is we'll push that down on this hose like that. Actually, pull that back out of there. Put the hose on, clamp on first. Drop the sensor back down in there. Put it over the heater core. Like that. And you put your clamp back on it. That way you get a nice seal, but yet you still have your sensors down inside there now. It goes to your thermostat. So let me tighten that up real quick. Okay, what I'm doing here is taking the filter, which is that 10 micron filter. This is your last defense before it actually gets into your injectors. You don't want to clog up your injectors because you want to filter this stuff down below 20 microns for it to work in your car. What I'm doing now, as you can see, I'm using that same hose that we used in the back. I'm going to make the connection to this valve, and we're going to go to the bottom. That's going to be your vegetable oil. Now there's other ways to hook up this valve, so I can't guarantee that, you know, this particular application. Well, I can guarantee the way I got it hooked up will work, because it's worked for me for the last year. So if you want to choose to use the other 3 valves on it, the other 3 ports, that's your decision. But I know if you put it to the bottom one and you follow my wiring diagram, it'll switch between vegetable oil and diesel oil when you want it to. Okay, so right now we have the vegetable line hooked up. The vegetable oil is going to come through this copper tube. This is your bleeder valve, so you can get the air out of the line, which we'll need once in a while because you'll run out, or it'll just get a big air bubble in it. You got to get it out through this. This is your filter. This is that Pollock valve, which you can get through J.C. Whitney. Make sure your connections are tight. Make sure nothing's touching, nothing moving or away from your exhaust here. That's why I'm using the cable ties to hold it all back. Just remember, be safe. Okay, it's hard. It's going to be hard to show you exactly how this next step goes because the lines are buried down in there, and we're going to be able to get the camera down in there. So I'm going to basically explain it. On your injector pump, you have 2 lines that come off of it. One of them is going to be your fill line, which is going to fill, come down from the fuel filter and fill up your injector pump, and the other one is going to be your return line, which takes the fuel which you're not burning back to the tank and drops it in the tank. Well, because we don't want to mix the vegetable oil with the diesel fuel tank, we're going to put a T in it like this. This is basically, it's not, just for illustration purposes, but we're going to put a T in the fuel line that comes back, that the line that actually goes into the injector pump from your fuel filter. We're going to put a T in there, and the reason we're doing that is we're going to take your return line, we're going to snip it. You'll put a bolt in the line that goes back to the tank. The extra piece that you just snipped, you're going to put it onto that T like this. So basically what you're doing is creating a loop. That way the fuel will come down, go through your injector pump, what's not burned gets put right back in the line and just keeps going into a continuous circle instead of going down the line and back into your tank. If you did that, you'd have vegetable oil in your diesel tank. So you got to find there's 2 lines. Once again, there's 2 lines. You got your in line coming from your fuel filter, and then you have your return line going back to the tank. You can just follow the 2 lines coming back from your gas tank, your fuel tank, and you'll be able to tell the one that has your fuel filter hooked to it. That's obviously your in line. So you want to take that one, split it, put a T fitting in there like this. The other line is going to be your return line. You're going to split it, put a bolt in the other side of it because you're not going to need it no more. Wrap it up, put it out of the way. And the excess you just had, put it onto the T. Make sure you put hose fittings on it. That way you're making a loop. So let me do that real quick, and then we'll get back to you. Okay, what I did, you see my fuel filter right here. You see fuel dripping out of it. I cut the line. I did it down a little further though, and I put that T in there I was telling you about. And you can see this line right here, that's my return line. I teed into it. So now this line right here is coming from it's called a lift pump. I don't know why they call it a lift pump. It's actually just a fuel pump. Same one that's in the back there by the vegetable tank. That pushes the fuel up through this filter. This is diesel fuel now we're talking about. Pushes it up through this filter. And from here, it's going to go to this top port on the back of this valve right above the vegetable oil. That way, this valve can either switch between your vegetable oil on the bottom and your diesel fuel on the top. So let me hook that line up real quick. See how we got the black line? That's your diesel fuel. It goes to the top port right here, the way the valve's situated, the top large port. The bottom port is your vegetable oil. Okay, so this line right here comes directly from the fuel pump at the back of the truck, or your lift pump, wherever your lift pump's at. Here's my fuel filter. That line runs right up here to the top of this Pepsijoe valve, it's called. And on this side, this is your outside. So this side right here will go directly to your injector pump, which is this line right here. This is the line I snipped. It also has that T-fitting in it I was telling you about. That's the one we put the T-fitting in. That way we don't mix the tanks, because it's going to have the diesel fuel or vegetable oil go down that into the injector, and what's not used will get put right back through that T and get used again. That way you're not contaminating the tanks. So let me put this on this fitting right here and seal it up, and then we'll go about wiring up the valve. Okay, this valve right here, that Pepsijoe valve that switches between the diesel and the vegetable oil, this was around 60 bucks. It'll come with a plug-in like this. It's got these other 3 wires, which we don't need, so I just got them round up out of the way. They're all have alphabets on them. We'll explain here in a second where all these go. Okay, this switch is what they give you. It's called a double pole, double throw switch. It comes with the valve. Now, since I've already had this truck up and running for a year, I marked what the connections are. It's got this little plate that comes off and on. This way you'll be able to do it the same way. You'll get instructions with it, and you can read them and make your own decisions on whether or not you want to use them other valves, the other ports I mean, but what I've been using seems to work. But you'll notice it's got that little groove in it, like on most switches. The tab will line up. That way you know which way's up. I put auxiliary will be up when you go to mount this. This way, when you go to wire it up, you'll be wiring up to the same relation that I'm doing it. Looking at it from the front, you see I marked it. That's your negative. This hooks to a negative ground. See I put a D there on this port. These are all numbered or lettered. This letter number D, this is the vegetable oil one. See this green line right here? I got that running through the engine compartment here, and it runs to the back. I'll show you. Here's that green line again. That's hooked up to the D side of this switch. That's going to hook to your positive side of your pump. So that way when you flick the switch up, it'll run on it'll turn on this pump, and it makes that valve switch over to vegetable oil. That way they're doing it at both the same time together. So we'll make that connection here in a second. On the other side of this valve, or sorry, the other side of the switch, you got your 12 volt at the top. Now when you get it, it won't be marked like this. Like I said, I marked this just because I knew I was doing this video. The second one down is E. If you look at this, there's an E. That is your diesel fuel. So on that line, you can see one of them wires goes down to my lift. They call it a lift pump, but it's the same pump it's another pump that's hooked to my diesel fuel. That's what pushes the diesel fuel up here to the injector. And the other line here goes to inside goes to the switch. Okay, that way when you flick the switch down like it is right now, it sends a signal to this, so it's running on diesel. Remember, when we hook this up, you want to blow through it first. The two open, it'll be open without no power to this. This is open. Diesel fuel will run through it. When you send power to it and flick that switch up, it'll activate it. It'll shut off the diesel fuel on this side and open it up where your vegetable oil will go to it. Just remember that. Okay, so right now, this right here, D, that runs back to the vegetable oil pump. I got a little connector on here, you can see. It runs, them two are connected together. So the green wire goes back to my vegetable oil pump, so it'll pump the oil up here. Goes into port D right here, and this blue wire goes inside and connects to this switch. On that side right there it says D. Remember, the middle one, if you're looking at the switch with the auxiliary up on the left side. This is the most complicated part of this thing, but after you get this figured out, you're almost running. So let me go and plug this in here. It only goes in one way. Like that. There we go. So now we'll go inside and I'll show you the wiring on the inside. Or let me let this truck down. Okay, what we're going to do now is wire up the switch. Once again, this is all relation. If you wire up the same way, it'll work. This little plate, it says main on one side and auxiliary on the other. It only fits on this switch one way because of the little tongue and groove right there. It'll slide right over it. So you want auxiliary to be facing up. That way all your plugs will be the same. This top right one will be your 12 volt. We're going to put it on 12 volt switch by the key. That way, whenever I turn the key off, I know the power is dead to all the pumps and the solenoid out front. So that's going to go right there. Like I said, once again, I've done this. I've had this truck running for the last year, so I know where these wires go. Plus, some of them are labeled under here. This is my ground. It's just grounded to this little bracket I made, which, like I said, it ain't nothing fancy, but it works. Function before fashion. This is my negative. You'll see on the other side of the switch. Remember, 12 volt on that side, negative on the other. That'll go right there. This little wire right here hooks to this little green light. This is where that thermostat out there I showed you comes into play. Remember we took that probe and stuck it into the heater, the line going into the heater core? That way, after the water has made its pass all the way through under the truck, heated up that fuel, the vegetable oil, and that copper line all the way under the truck, goes back to the tank back there, through the tank, heats up the oil in the tank, goes through that fuel filter back there, heats that up, then it comes back in that line that I showed you, all the way underneath the truck, and then it goes into the heater core. Once it reaches that heater core, that's got an adjustable, it's an adjustable thermostat. I tinkered with it for a couple days and got it set, so this light is hooked. There's two wires coming off that thermostat. One of the wires goes to, I hooked it to the ground. The other one, I brought it inside this truck. It is right here. I have it hooked to this light. The other side of this light goes to, I'm going to put it on the 12 volt. The only way that light will work is when that thermostat out there makes a connection, just like if it's a thermostatic, just like your thermostat fan. When it gets either positive or negative goes through it, it'll work. If you got it set to the right temperature, it'll kick on. So that way, when this green light comes on, after like I said, it took a little bit of messing with, but I've got it set now. That's why I got this temperature gauge just hanging here. Well, it's not hanging here. It's on this little bracket. When it reaches 180 degrees, I know it's safe to switch this truck over to vegetable oil, and I flick the switch up. Just that simple. It makes that solenoid valve out there switch over to vegetable oil, and at the same time, because of the way we got it wired, that same wire that I showed you earlier, it runs from out there to the solenoid valve and goes back to that fuel pump on the back. It'll switch it over at the same time. That way they both kick on. Then when you switch it down, it runs on diesel. It'll send the voltage through this out there to that valve, and also we spliced into that wire, and I told you the same wire, the other wire runs back down to the diesel fuel pump. These wires, make sure you put a fuse on it. You got to have a fusible link because you don't want to burn nothing up. But as you run the wires in, remember, see how this says E on it? That comes from out there on that little plug that plugs into your Pollock valve. It has the E on where the E wire has E on this. That way I know it goes. If you're looking at the switch again, it goes to the right side, middle one. These two bottom ones you don't use. If you read your directions, I believe these two right here control the other three ports on the other side. Since I don't use them, I don't worry about them. So we'll just wire, and this other wire right here goes to your D, which is the other side in the middle. So the only four connections you're going to use if you're looking at the switch, the top side is the auxiliary, because remember this little plate only fits on it one way. That's your 12 volt, that's your negative. The right side right here is the E, and that's your D. These correspond to the plug-in out there on the Pollock valve. You wire it up this way, I guarantee it'll work. We'll show you in a few minutes when we're running for free on vegetable oil. So give me a second. I have this right here. I'll mount in this hole right here because I drilled it and put it there. And we'll hook all these wires up, and then we will fill up the tank back there and we'll show you how it works. Now we got this switch wired up. That simple. So I'm going to install this in this little hole I drilled right here in this little piece of metal. Put my plate on it. It only, like I said, only goes on one way because of the tongue and groove. And then we're going to, after this, we're going to go out back here to the back of the truck. I'm going to put some oil in it. We're going to purge the line, and we'll be running for free in a matter of minutes. Now here is a switch. Like I said, just from down, I know it's diesel, up's vegetable oil. This switch, you know, I could have put it up on this nice, beautiful wood grain dash on this 21-year-old truck. Same way with that green light. I could have put it all up here, made it look nice and pretty. But when I built the truck last year, this right here seemed to work, so I didn't want to drill into the dash. It's out of the way, and it's right. I'm just used to having it there. So like I said, next let's go back here and we'll fill up my tank. We'll purge the line, and we'll be ready to run. Okay, this green wire that's coming up out of the bed, this is the wire that comes from the front up there. I spliced into the wire right before the letter D on the Polic valve, and it runs into that switch. That way, when you flick it on, when you flick it up, it'll run on vegetable oil. That sends power back to this, which turns on this pump right here. So we got to make this connection real quick. When you get the oil from the restaurants, this is going to be in my second video on how you actually get it and get it clean. But this is what it'll look like. Got a few things floating in it. That's why you got to remember, you got to filter it down below 20 microns, so none of that stuff gets caught in your injectors. But I'm going to show you on the second part of the second video how to pick the oil up from the restaurants and then clean it. Once you get a little system set up, you'll be doing good. But right now, we're going to go ahead and fill up that tank. In the process also of filling up the coolant system, because now we added all that extra hose and the tank back here, so it's going to take a little bit more antifreeze. So we're going to go ahead and, I got a tube right here. We're going to drop in here. I'm going to kick on my system. It'll suck this out and fill up our tank, and we should be running here in a few minutes. So what we're doing now is actually filling up the tank. You can see the transmission cooler in there. This tank will fill up. That's why you noticed I put this fitting right here. That way when I have a lid on to keep the heat in, I ain't never got to mess with it no more, because you can see the vegetable oil coming through the line. The tank's filling up, and the transmission cooler down there will be buried in that vegetable oil, and it'll heat up the vegetable oil so we can use it. That noise you're hearing in the background is the truck running. We're running coolant through it right now. We can get it all through all the lines. In a few minutes here it'll warm up and we'll be able to switch right over to vegetable oil. Okay, what we're going to do now, since we just filled that tank, we're going to go ahead and bleed the line. We're going to open up this valve. This right here is going to push the air out. That way when you turn on the pump back there, it'll push the vegetable oil through the line and out this little, that way it'll push it all the way up to this point right here. So we're going to go ahead and open it up. And now we're going to go turn on the ignition. That way it's getting 12 volts back to that pump back there, and it'll push that vegetable oil right up here. What you're seeing here is the vegetable oil being pulled up there, because the pump's on now, because we have the switch up that I showed you earlier. The little pump, you can feel it vibrating. It's pulling it down into this Web 525 fuel water separator / heater. And it's filling it up right now. I've got to make sure it's tight, which it is. Pretty soon you'll see it pulled through here, down, and then it's going to go right on down through that copper tube that we put underneath the truck, through that hose within a hose, and it's going to come out up there to that bleeder valve. Once it gets to the bleeder valve, we can turn it off, turn off the bleeder valve, and then we just got to wait for the truck to warm up to 180 degrees, and we're running for free. They'll be coming up here anytime. Doing now is it's going through there. See, there it goes. Now you tighten that up. Sure, it's messy, but we're tightening it up. We'll wipe up that mess. That's why you carry around that degreaser, so you can clean up all this mess. But now we got vegetable fuel all the way up here. So now what it's going to do is work its way through this filter. Okay, now that we got the truck fired up and running, we went through and checked for leaks. check all your fittings and hoses. The truck's running fine on diesel fuel. We've been running it for a few minutes. What we're going to do is fire it up on. You gotta remember this also. You got to start the truck on diesel when the motor's cold, and then about a mile before you get to where you're going, switch it back over to diesel. But once it warms up and this green light comes on, then you know that you can flick it up and run it on vegetable oil. Right now the green light's on. That tells me that the oil in the line is hot enough for it to run because of the way we hooked it up. So now it's running on diesel fuel. I just flick the switch up. The pump back there is pumping the vegetable oil. Now we're running for free on vegetable oil. There you have it. Driving for free on vegetable oil. Okay, once again, this tank's hot now because the hot water's flowing through it. The hot water flows through that tube from the motor, through that line that we made called a hose within a hose, through this red hose right here, into the tank. It's heating up the oil right now as you drive. The hot water comes back out of this other red line, goes into this fuel filter slash water separator heater. Out of that, right here in this line, and from here, it goes back up front in your heater core. Your vegetable oil is pulled through this, through your pump, through the pump, down through that hose within a hose we made. And it comes back up front here, out this copper tube again. There's your bleeder valve, through this filter, into the valve. The Polic valve that switches between diesel and vegetable oil, and that's how you run it. And this is your thermostat, which we just have hooked up to that light, and we set it at 180, and we know that just because I got that temperature gauge there, and I just kept adjusting it clockwise, counterclockwise until the light come on at 180. That way when I'm driving down the road, I know it's safe to turn it on. And that's it. So now you too can be driving for free. Stay tuned for DVD number 2, which will show you actually how to go get the oil from the restaurants and clean it. Alright, on that last video you just seen me taking this truck, putting the vegetable oil system on it, and actually making it run on vegetable oil. Now remember, this only works on a diesel vehicle. It will only work on a diesel. When you go to start these things up, you have to start them up on diesel, and once they're warm, that green light will come on that we put on on the dash. Once that green light's on, you can flick it over to diesel, or to vegetable oil I mean, and you'll be driving around on vegetable oil. Then about a mile or two, figure about 2 miles before you get to where you're supposed to be going for the day, you flick that switch back down so it'll go over to, you'll have diesel go through all your injector lines, and so when you go to start it up the next time, it'll be easier to start. Because if it don't start because you left the switch down or left the switch up on vegetable oil, best thing to do is flick it back over to diesel. Try to start it again. If it don't start, always carry a can of ether with you. Because you spray a little bit of ether in that air intake, it'll start up. It might not like it, just spray a little bit in there, but that's your backup just in case you forget to flick that switch. Right now, today, we're going to go ahead and fill this truck up full of oil. This will be the second part of the video. So what I'm going to do is open this up and show you my oil pickup equipment, and then so you too can mount it. I got mine mounted inside the bed and out of the way so that I can still haul stuff back here because I make deliveries with this little truck. So let me show you that. What we have here is a CarQuest fuel filter, and you can get the housing for it also. The reason for a fuel filter is because fuel filters have a tighter micron than an oil filter. Remember, a micron is the weave of the mesh inside the filter that actually catches the particles. So this one, I know this one's a 10 micron filter. It's a CarQuest 86107 filter, and the housing that goes with it. So if you go to the store to get this exact same setup, that's the one you want to ask for. Is get the housing and the filter that goes with it. I think the housing was like $30, and the filter is like $7 a pop every time I use it. I put quick connects on here so I can just disconnect them, pop them out, and change them because I have different fittings that I use. Because this is like for a 5-gallon bucket that clips on there. Because some of the restaurants I go to, they give me their oil in a 5-gallon bucket. Today we're going to pick it up directly from the oil vat, so we'll show you how that works. This is just 3/8 clear tubing I got from a hardware store. This rod I made out of, it's just copper tubing, a 1/2-inch copper tubing with a barb fitting I put on here. Soldered it on. You pull it out, get my glove on. As you can see, like I said, this is just a piece of copper tube, I guess about 4 foot long. This one long piece with that, put a T-fitting on it, soldered it on there, and then wrapped window screen around it and clamped it on there with a quick zip tie. So this keeps the pump from picking up any big stuff that's in that tank. And I took this other piece, and I guess I could have soldered it on there, but I used hose clamps. And I just measured down roughly 6 inches to keep this tip here from sitting down in the very bottom of the tank where you'll have your water and your fat. And I'll show you that in a little bit on this little demonstration tank I have at home. How they'll have water on the bottom, then vegetable oil, or no, sorry, water, then the fat, and then a layer of vegetable oil. So let's go ahead and put this one in the tank. And it just sits that, see, it goes down below the level of the vegetable oil that's in there, so it ain't sitting directly on the bottom where the fat and the water's at. So now that that's in there, we'll let me show you the pump setup. This pump I got out of Northern Tool and Automotive, or Northern Tool and Equipment, that same book I was showing you where I got the tank from. It's a FlowJet model number 4300-143. It's just a 12-volt pump, and I just have it plumbed in here from the filter. And on this side, it's just plumbed in and hooks up to just a line I put together that puts it into that fill side of that tank that we made. This right here is just a piece of 3-inch PVC that I mounted to the side of the truck that the pickup rod sits in. That way I don't have oil getting all over the back of my truck. And I put a barb fitting on the bottom inside of it, right there you can see it. That way, and I've drilled a little hole in the bed. That way, if there's any excess oil inside that pickup tube, it just drips it out on the ground instead of filling up the inside of my truck. That's about it. I did not install a switch on this, which I should have, but right now I just use this. There's the pump kicking on. Watch the oil come up this tube. There it goes. It'll suck it through this filter in a second here. And what that filter's doing is cleaning out that all the sediments out of that oil. Pretty soon you'll see it on this side. There it goes. You'll see that tank start filling up. It'll take a little bit. This pump pumps about 1.3 gallons a minute roughly. You can get bigger pumps. That'd be my suggestion. If you can afford it, get you the biggest pump you can possibly get, whether it be gas powered or 12-volt powered or however you want to do it. You can get different filter systems. You know, I've just been tinkering with this for a while, and for availability, this is what I have available to me. So this filter is readily available. I can always get it at my parts store. So I'm able, when I fill up, I'm able to get about, from the place I get the oil from, I'm able to get about 100 gallons out of these filters before I have to replace them. So that's about $7 for every 100 gallons is what it's costing me right now to fill up. But at the price of today's diesel fuel, it's saving money, you know, a lot. But right now we'll just let this thing run, fill up that tank, we'll be still driving for free. Okay, while this is filling up, you can see the vegetable oil going through the line. I'm going to talk to you about a few things about this setup. In my experience, it'd be best to find a smaller vehicle that doesn't use as much fuel, period. The reason that is because you don't want to spend 2 or 3 days a week picking up vegetable oil when you can just go, I go like once every 2 weeks and fill up that 26-gallon tank, and that's it. This truck gets about 25 miles to the gallon. For every gallon of diesel, or for every gallon of vegetable oil I use, it gets about 25 miles to the gallon. Now for every gallon of diesel I'm using, right now because it's warm outside, it's getting about right around 180 miles to the gallon, something like that. Because because you have to start it on diesel once again and turn it off on diesel. So I'm not using nowhere near as much diesel. But as far, when I'm running it just on vegetable oil, it gets about 26 miles to the gallon, 25, 26, right in that area. So, in my opinion, if I was to do this again and get I'd get like a Volkswagen Golf or a Jetta or a little, maybe another little truck or something. But I wouldn't want to put it on a big honking V8 Power Stroke diesel that gets 7 miles to the gallon, because you're going to go through a lot of vegetable oil. Unless you just happen to own a restaurant that has a lot of vegetable oil, then it's no big deal. But I seem to find out that it's easier to go every 2 weeks like I do and fill it up, and I don't even worry about it anymore. That'd be my best bet if I was to do it again. The video that you just watched, if you know anything about cars, it'll help you out tremendously on putting this on. Remember, everything I've showed you as far as the filtering system. If you have a different type of filter you want to use, just remember the micron. If you want to at least keep below 10 microns for your filters, because that's what's going to keep all the food particles out of your injectors on your car. So you can, if you get a different, wherever you live at, you don't have a CarQuest auto parts store, just go in and ask them to go through the filter book and get you the filter and the housing, that they're able to sell to you, because not all auto parts stores will have the same supplier, so they're going to have different brand name filters. So you can use any type of filter that's available to you. Is what I'm saying. And you want to be able to find one, like I said, that's filters at 10 micron or below. And the same with the pump. You don't have to use that flow jet pump. I personally, if I had a bigger pump, it'd be great, because then instead of standing there for 20 minutes filling up my truck, I could do it for 10 minutes and be on my way. But this is the one I have available to me, so it's the one I'm going to use. You might not have a pickup where you're able to mount all this stuff on the sidewall like I did. You might end up having a little car, but you can make a little. You can do it there's endless possibilities. Is what I'm basically trying to say. You don't have to do the exact same setup that I'm doing. I'm just showing you the system that I use and what works for me. Okay. While this thing's filling up, also I'll show you this. These are just brackets that I got from the hardware store, just some angle iron with a bunch of holes in it. I got the one with the holes in it because it's just easier to mount it in the truck and bolt it all down. I just made it where it's all sturdy in here and it ain't going to go nowhere, in the bracket holes. And because you're out driving this truck around anyway, you hit potholes and run over stuff in the road, whatever. You don't want anything back here breaking, because you don't want it to add up. You're trying to save money, not spend money. You just mount it in here the best way you can, and you end up saving yourself money in the long run. Okay, as you can tell, the tank is full, because you see the line all the way at the top. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and pull this rod out of here. You'll hear the pump change. It's running out of fluid. Turn this over and get all the vegetable oil out of it. Get out of that line right there. Forgot my other glove, or I'd be wearing it. That line's clean. Let me put this back in the back of this truck. Alright, you see it go right in this holder I made. There you go. That way, if there's any vegetable oil inside that tube, it's just going to go right on down it, and then through that little opening I made down there and drip down on the ground. Let me turn this pump off. And that's it. As you can tell, I got a full tank of vegetable oil. It took